It's inevitable. Another year, another birthday. Except for this year, I want to make myself a cake. And I know you're going to laugh, but one of my all-time favorite cakes going back to being a little kid is the Funfetti cake. Yes, I'm 5 years old. Believe it or not though, I've actually never made a Funfetti cake, but I do have a really solid vanilla cake recipe. Just going to change up a few things to try to get it right. We do need to start off though by making that cake batter. Sound good? Let's bake. One of the ways to make a very moist and tender cake is using cake flour, except it's not always available to everybody. But a really quick home remedy would be 2 tablespoons of cornstarch to 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and that's exactly what we're going to use here. All right, so we're going to add 7 tablespoons of cornstarch to 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Next, I have 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of sea salt. What we want to do is just mix this together until it is completely combined. Once it is completely combined, just set it to the side. Then we're going over to my stand mixer. I've got 3 sticks of softened, unsalted butter. We're going to add those in there, fix the paddle attachment. Let's lock it into place, crank the speed on to medium, get everything moving around for about 1 to 2 minutes. And then next, we want to add in 2 cups of granulated sugar. I know oftentimes I use organic sugar, which is a little bit brown, but we want this cake to be nice and white, so we're going with regular granulated sugar. Now let's crank that speed to high, whip it for 5 to 7 minutes. We want to get it nice and light and fluffy, just like this. Then we're going to come back and add 1 tablespoon of good vanilla extract. Everything is looking really, really good. Let me turn this off for a second and say this. We're going to add the eggs, but instead of adding whole eggs, we're going to use just the whites. We want to keep this cake incredibly white, which is different from my normal vanilla cake recipe because we want those sprinkles to really come through, and you really see it if the cake batter is super white. So we're going to go all egg whites here. And when it comes to adding the egg whites in there, what we want to do is add in a little bit at a time until it's mixed in, until we add in more. So it's probably going to take 3 or 4 pours until the egg whites are completely mixed in. And then we're going to add a little bit more fat. I've got a 1/2 cup of neutral flavored oil. Any neutral flavored oil will do as long as it's expeller pressed. One thing that you have to do, and I even hate doing it myself, is you have to stop and scrape the bowl at this point just to make sure all those ingredients are being incorporated. If you don't do this, you're gonna see chunks at the bottom of the bowl and you're just gonna miss it being mixed in. So just stop, give it a quick scrape. Really, really easy. Then we'll put it right back down and keep going. Now let's add the final things here. We need to add the dry and the wet. So we have all of our dry ingredients. We're going to add it in 3 batches. Add in the first batch, wait till it's completely mixed in before we add in a total of 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons of cold buttermilk. Well, we're gonna add the first batch first. All right, Comies, real quick. The reason I'm using buttermilk is because it will absolutely make your cake so tender and moist. Now, if you don't have any on hand, what you can do is add 1 tablespoon of white vinegar to 1 cup of whole milk. You're welcome. Let's head back to the mixer, add in our second round of dry ingredients. Make sure it's mixed in before adding in our final bout of buttermilk. And then last but not least, of course, our dry ingredients. And gosh, is that sloppy. Let's use a little rubber scraper and start cleaning some things up. Sorry about that. Let's have a look. It looks fantastic. Mix it until just mixed in. This is great. We're going to remove it. Then we're going to add in 2/3 cup of sprinkles. I think this should be plenty to really see and shine through when we slice open that cake. Gently fold it together, but don't overmix it. Just as soon as those sprinkles are in there, we're good to go. Batter is finished. What we want to do now is prep up our cake pans. You know I like big, tall cakes, so I'm going to be using 3 9-inch cake pans, and I always put parchment paper down first. That just helps keep everything moist and non-stick. Once the parchment's in there, we are going to generously spread on 1 to 2 tablespoons of very softened unsalted butter on top and around. And I have to admit, it's really hard to get the parchment to stay still while putting the butter on, but I was always taught parchment and butter, no matter what. Maybe put the butter and the flour underneath and then put the parchment on top. I don't know, maybe easier for you. Once we finish up adding the butter, I'm just going to stick with this process. Let's add a tablespoon or 2 of all-purpose flour. Then we give it a shake and completely coat the butter with the flour and get rid of any excess in a small bowl. Repeat the process for the other 2 pans. Boom, we're finished. Now we want to evenly divide this batter. Remember, we have 3 cake pans. I'm just going to eyeball it. I think that's totally fine. Once it's in there,
spread it around using a rubber spatula or even an offset spatula, whatever you've got. And then usually what I like to do before I bake it, I give it a few little pat downs, get rid of any air pockets or anything in there. Then we're heading over to the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going to take in between 27 and 29 minutes. I know that's a little precise, but I promise it works. Then at that point, we are going to come back, take everything out. Looks really good. Got a nice little brown on top. We want to make sure this cools to room temperature.
And this is always the hardest part, the waiting game. This is gonna take about 90 minutes for them to completely cool. You cannot skip this part because if you put the buttercream on and the cake is warm, your icing's gonna melt. It's gonna be a disaster. But we're gonna come back with about 15 minutes left in the cooling process to make that buttercream. Alrighty, cakes are just about finished cooling. What we wanna do now is make our buttercream, and I'm gonna make a little bit extra because I wanna add a few little decorations on top. So we're gonna start off with 5 sticks of softened unsalted butter.
In our stand mixer, we're gonna add in 5 sticks of softened unsalted butter. We're gonna fix the paddle attachment and cream it for 1 to 2 minutes, just like in our cake batter. Then at this point, we're gonna turn the speed to low. We're gonna add in 5 cups of powdered sugar. I know that seems like a lot, but powdered sugar isn't nearly as intense in flavor as regular granulated sugar is.
And you should also definitely try the buttercream. You may need more sugar to your liking. If it's really thick, thin it out with a little bit of heavy cream, or if it's really thin, add a little bit more powdered sugar.
If the sweetness is to your liking, let's crank that speed onto high, whip it for 5 to 7 minutes, get it nice and light and fluffy and airy, just like this. We're gonna finish by mixing in 1 tablespoon of good vanilla. I turn the speed down to low, still splattered out a little bit. Mix it in there. Perfect. This looks fantastic, you guys. Honestly, take a little fingerful and try it because it's absolutely delicious. And remember, I said I'm going to decorate, so I'm going to set aside about a cup or so in a piping bag with a star tip and get it ready to hook up the top of our cake once it's finished being iced.
Almost time to sing happy birthday to me. It is assembly time, and what we want to do at this point is follow the exact same procedures as my carrot cake recipe video as far as cutting off the tops, layering, and icing. And again, don't worry if the middle fell down a little bit because here's what we're going to do is slice off the top.
Let's remove our cake from the pan. Should pop right out of there. Pull off the parchment paper. We're going to set it down. Then using a serrated knife, be very careful here. We want to slice off the top layer where the brown part is. It's just going to look better. I know it seems crazy, but be delicate too with this cake, okay, when cutting it. If you still got some brown in the center, just come back, take that off there, no problem. We're going to set it on a cardboard round, which is going to make it easy to transport. Now I'm going to take out my trusty cake turner here. I love this thing. Let's put a little dollop here of icing in the center. We're going to place down that cardboard round. This is going to help because if we spin it around, it's not going to fly off this turner. Then we're going to take about 1 cup or so of our buttercream and then just spread it on there using an offset spatula back and forth. No big deal. Let's add on the second layer, do the same exact process until all the layers are on there, all 3 layers. This looks fantastic. And don't go too crazy, okay? Here you can drive yourself really wild. Then we're going to put icing on the sides. This does not have to be beautiful because we're going to come back with a cake bench knife, turn this thing and get it nice and flattened and scraped and looking pretty. And then for the top, I was always taught to come in for landing like the airplane does. And that's how I'm going to fix it on the top here.
And I do want to say this, you can drive yourself nuts trying to make this cake look perfect in this way. If you just want to use a spoon and slather it all on there, so be it. It's all good. It's still going to look beautiful and taste amazing. And it will always go back to these fundamental techniques, whether it's cooking or baking. Putting those things into practice over and over again will absolutely elevate your everyday cooking. Let's finish this off with the topping.
So using our piping bag with our star tip, we are just going to make little star twists here, little rounds. Looks really, really pretty. I can get about 8 here. I want some big slices, right? Now we're gonna sprinkle on a little bit more of our sprinkles right on top of each of these little rounds. Looks really cool, you guys, and the moment of truth is upon us. Let's take a nice big fat slice. After all, it's my birthday, huh? I want a big slice. This is perfection.
Oh my gosh, I can't think of a better cake to celebrate my birthday with than this Funfetti cake. Now, if you really want to go back to your childhood, check out my funnel cake. It will take you straight back to the county fair. I've got a great recipe video. We'll see you on there.